What's going on, fellas? Hope everyone is doing well. We are wrapping up our Dynasty positional tier rankings with our top 15 tight ends. We've gone through 15 quarterbacks, 20 running backs, 20 wide receivers, and we put the cherry on top today with our top 15 tight ends. If you have not checked out any of those other ranking videos, I will link those in the description for you to check out at any time. But for today, we're going through the tight ends where there has been an injection of youth to the position. So without further ado, let's jump right into our S tier tight ends, starting with Sam Laporta. There is not much that needs to be said other than it was a historic 2023, and the fact that the team did not go out and acquire another high-end option to pair with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So Laporta is the number 2 option in this Lions offense. So we can continue to expect more of the same from last year for Laporta moving forward. And then for Trey McBride, who finished as the tight end 3 the second half of the season after the Cardinals released Zach Ertz. Trey McBride, on essentially half a season sample, was first in targets per route run and was top 5 in yards per route run, receptions, and yards after the catch. So the guy is a volume play. Now, the team did go out and draft Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft this year. So McBride is locked into that number 2 role, but that does not mean it's the end of the world because the team is also without Marquise Brown now and Rondale Moore, who combined accounted for 163 targets in this offense. So some of those are going to go to Trey McBride. So Trey McBride, for the foreseeable future, will continue to be a staple in this Cardinals offense. We're going to move on to our A tier here, where you see Brock Bowers, Dalton Kincaid, TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, and Mark Andrews. Let's start with Brock Bowers first. His calling card is his ability after the catch. He is another one of these wide receivers that just so happens to play the tight end position. His ceiling is pretty high despite the, highly debated landing spot for him in Vegas. But the talent of Brock Bowers gives him a super high ceiling. But he's in the A tier going into this season because, one, he's a rookie, and we've seen rookie tight ends have some issues trying to translate to the NFL right away. Laporta is the exception there. The second thing is that he is behind Devontae Adams for at least this year, and that's not the end of the world, again, because we put Trey McBride in the S tier, and he's the number 2 option behind Marvin Harrison Jr. But what solidifies him in this A tier is the fact that he's in a Luke Getsy offense where Luke Getsy likes to run the ball. The Chicago Bears, where he was the offensive coordinator last year, were top 3 in run rate last year. So he does not mind running the ball. And he has Gardner Minshew as his quarterback. So it's not the most ideal situation. But again, his talent alone puts him into this A tier as a steady option who can easily get into this S tier after this year. The next guy in this A tier is Dalton Kincaid. It took him a little while to get going last year. He was the tight end 23 through the first 5 weeks, and then he missed week 6. But then after that, until the end of the season, he was the tight end 9 with 7 top 10 finishes. And honestly, what puts him into this top 4, if you were to look at it like that, is the fact that he is the number 1 option in this Buffalo offense, with no more Stephon Diggs and his wide receivers being Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir. So there's a chance that we also see Dalton Kincaid get into this S tier next year, just because he is with Josh Allen for the foreseeable future. Next guy in this A tier is TJ Hawkinson, and he's likely going to miss at least half of the 2024 season due to his knee injury that he picked up in week 16 of last season. But before he got hurt, he was the tight end 1 overall in all of fantasy football. Now, Kirk Cousins is gone, so that will affect some things. And on top of that, he has Sam Darnold and or J.J. McCarthy throwing him the ball. So it's kind of a double whammy in that sense, that it's no longer Kirk, and you've got a rookie in J.J. McCarthy, and you've got almost bust Sam Darnold. So it's not the most ideal, quarterback situation for TJ Hawkinson, but the fact is that this offense is designed for him to be a heavily targeted weapon. And because of that, as well as his age, he's only 26 years old. Yes, you are going to have to find an option for at least half of this season because he's not going to be playing. But once he's healthy and back, he's going to be a very, very valuable dynasty asset. Next is Kyle Pitts, and Kyle Pitts is really the enigma of these tight end dynasty rankings because on one hand, Arthur Smith is gone, and another branch of the Sean McVay tree and Zach Robinson is in. So it was already good that Arthur Smith was out, but it got even better that we're getting a Sean McVay tree branch as the play caller now for the Falcons. With his untapped potential and being 23 years old, it seems like everything is going in the right direction for Kyle Pitts. On the other hand, it's the fact that there are no guarantees that Pitts will become a consistent piece, right, for our dynasty teams, even with the upgraded quarterback with Kirk Cousins and Zach Robinson calling the plays. So for me, Kyle Pitts, one of the more riskier investments when it comes to dynasty fantasy football, especially at the tight end position. But there is a path for Kyle Pitts to become a much more consistent option. And if he does, and if he becomes a more consistent option, we are then likely seeing a top 5 tight end year in and year out. The last guy in the A tier, we're not going to spend too much time on because it's Mark Andrews. He's 28 years old, so he's still got a little bit of youth on his side. And he's finished top 5 in scoring on a per game basis in each of the last 5 seasons. He's one of the most underappreciated tight ends in fantasy football in general because he's been so good for so long. And despite playing only half a season last year, he was still top 5 in target share, in touchdowns, and yards per route run. Mark Andrews is still very, very good. Because of his youth at 28 years old, he does find his way into the A tier versus some of the guys in the B tier who you see are Travis Kelce and George Kittle, who are the older guys on this list, right? Travis Kelce's 34. George Kittle is 30 currently, and we will get into Kittle here in just a second. But for Travis Kelce, right? If you have Travis Kelce and you're contending, you just ride it out, right? You know how good he is. You don't try to get youthful at the position. Just ride it out because you know that he's going to produce for you. But if you have Travis Kelce and you're rebuilding, you might want to consider going for a TJ Hawkinson or for a Kyle Pitts, right? Getting some youth while still getting some good production. And in Dynasty, you may have to package Travis Kelce, which sounds backwards, right? Who's like arguably the best tight end year in and year out and you're paying more to go get one of those other guys, but that's just Dynasty because those are factors that you have to take into account. But again, when it comes down to for Travis Kelce, he is top 3 at the position year in and year out. It's just a matter of how much longer are we going to see it because he is 34 years old. George Kittle, on the other hand, who is 30 years old, he is going to be 31 by season's end. So he's getting up there in age as well. In the last 3 seasons for George Kittle, he's averaging 65 receptions on 90 targets for 900 yards. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. It's actually very solid. But it's the touchdowns that we need to talk about. In his career, he has finished with 2 touchdowns in 2 seasons, 5 touchdowns in 2 seasons, 6 touchdowns in 2 seasons, and 11 touchdowns in 1 season. You can probably guess which one the outlier is, right? I'm going to put the seasons with 2 touchdowns to the side because one of those was his rookie year and the other one he only played 8 games. So we're going to put those to the side. So then we're looking at the 2 seasons with 5, 2 seasons with 6, and the 11. The 11 is the outlier, right? So we're looking then somewhere between 5 and 6 touchdowns on average for George Kittle. And if you look at his stat line in 2023, it was smack dab average compared to what we've been seeing over the last 3 seasons, right? 65 receptions, 90 targets for a little over 1,000 yards, right? It was a tight end 5 overall. Very good. 12.7 fantasy points per game. Very good. A lot better than what other options were providing last year. The best way to describe George Kittle in Dynasty fantasy football is just based on where he is on this list, right? He is the last name in this B tier, and we are looking at 9 options right here. He is at the bottom of that totem pole of players that you'd want in Dynasty at your tight end position because he's getting up there in age, and we hit the mean. We hit the average for what he has been producing at for the past 3 seasons. So can it really get much better? I don't think there is a way where he overexceeds, he overachieves, I should say, and exceeds what he's been averaging over the last 3 seasons. We're going to move on to our C tier tight ends here with Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Jake Ferguson, and Dallas Goedert. First with Evan Ingram, we saw career bests in receptions and targets and yards last year. He was top 5 in target share, in routes run, in deep targets, in yards after the catch. And he will be 30 by season start. So after what we saw last year in his age, could he be in the B tier as well, right? An aging veteran who has had a year or two of solid production. I think there's an argument, but the fact is just that Kelce and Kittle have really cemented themselves and have done it for much longer than Ingram has, who has only done it for 1 year. So the other way to look at this is Travis Kelce and George Kittle. You don't necessarily need a plan B because you know that they are established assets in Dynasty fantasy football versus Evan Ingram. It was only really just 1 year of really solid production that is making him a valuable asset. So is there a chance for regression? Is there a chance that last year was the outlier, was the fluke? I think there is. So it may be smart to go invest in a plan B just in case Evan Ingram does not pan out like he did last year. Moving on to David Njoku, who had a very interesting but also very productive 2023 with 4 different quarterbacks. He still finished as the tight end 6 overall. He was top 5 in targets, target share, red zone targets, receptions, yards after the catch, and touchdowns. The thing to know about David Njoku as you invest in him in Dynasty, right? We're looking at 2-3 years ahead. He does have Deshaun Watson as his quarterback. And in the short sample that we got last year, when both Deshaun Watson and David Njoku were healthy and played together, Njoku finished as the tight end 28, the tight end 29, the tight end 23, the tight end 13, and the tight end 7 in weekly finishes. So hopefully, right, as things continue to mesh between Deshaun Watson and this offense, that Watson and Njoku kind of pick up where they left off last year, right, with tight end 13 and tight end 7 finishes. So we hope that continues. And then we also hope that Jerry Jeudy's presence doesn't affect things too much or take away from Njoku too much. So that another guy that's in the C tier that could be higher just because of the season that he had last year, but there are just some question marks that come with David Njoku moving forward. Next guy is Jake Ferguson, and last year was a very up and down year for Jake Ferguson, but he was the tight end 9 on the year in his first year as the Cowboys tight end 1. Ferguson would have 2 or 3 games with really, really good, really solid finishes. You know, he's tight end 9, tight end 10, tight end 11, somewhere in that range. But then he followed that up with 2 or 3 more games right after that where he's nowhere to be found out, near the top 20. He's pushing closer to top 25 or even top 30, right? He is similar to Sam Laporta and Trey McBride in the sense, though, that the team didn't go out and acquire another high-end option to pair with their stud wide receiver 1. So the path for Ferguson to continue being the number 2 option is right there. And honestly, we could see another jump from Jake Ferguson because this team also did not invest well enough, in my opinion, in their rushing attack. So they are content just letting Dak Prescott sling the ball around the field, and that benefits Jake Ferguson. So he's got some sneaky good upside moving forward. And he was first of all tight ends in red zone targets and third in total routes run last year. So Jake Ferguson, right? I had talked about the plan B with Evan Ingram. Jake Ferguson would be a awesome plan B to have because I would not be surprised if we see some more Jake Ferguson, top finishes from Jake Ferguson, I should say, going into 2024. Now for Dallas Goedert, for our last tight end here in the C tier, his situation isn't the most ideal, right? He's battling AJ Brown and Devontae Smith for targets. He has a rushing quarterback in Jalen Hurts. And the team did go out and sign Saquon Barkley, right? So this offense, as high powered as it is, just from a talent perspective, it'll be interesting to see how mouths are fed in this offense. And history has kind of taught us that it's not the most ideal. It's not exactly the best for Dallas Goedert, right? When AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Goddard are all healthy and playing together, Goddard has averaged 11.9 fantasy points back in 2022, and in 2023 he averaged 9.6. So it's essentially 4 catches for 40 yards or 5 catches for 50 yards, and sprinkle in a touchdown here or there on a game basis. So again, nothing spectacular, but he is on one of the highest scoring offenses in the league with a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore that is very familiar and does, there is history with tight ends producing well in his offenses, right? We go all the way back to 2019 when he first took over as the offensive coordinator in Dallas. Jason Witten, that's a blast from the past. Holy cow. But Jason Witten was the tight end 11. The next 3 years then with Dalton Schultz, tight end 11, tight end 3, and the tight end 10. And even last year in his 1 year with the Chargers, there was a stretch where Gerald Everett was the tight end 11. So Dallas Goedert, low end tight end 1 option. But again, being in a high powered offense, there are opportunities for him to have really, really good weeks that could ultimately make the difference for you in your matchup. So I debated putting Dallas Goedert in the D tier. And speaking of, you will see why, because between Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, and Cole Kmet, they are all the 3rd or 4th option in their offense. But the fact is just that Dallas Goedert being in this Eagles offense with Kellen Moore, you can make the argument that their offense is more established and that their offense will put up points. And so that could benefit Dallas Goedert. So that's why he's in the C tier. Why Dalton Schultz and Cole Kmet then are in the D tier, right? These are 3rd or 4th options in rising offenses that still have some youth to their name, right? Dalton Schultz is 27 years old. He's battling Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell for targets. But if this offense continues with the big plays and efficiency, there will be some weeks where Dalton Schultz will give you big fantasy performances. And then for Cole Kmet, who's 25 years old, he's battling DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze for targets. But this offense, right, with Caleb Williams now under center, will be getting better year after year. And for both of these guys, if the veteran wide receiver leaves after this season, Keenan Allen and Stephon Diggs, if they leave their respective offenses, both of these guys then become the number 3 option in their offense. So with youth to their name and rising offenses, they are still worth investing in. They may not be your bona fide tight end 1s that you start week in and week out. But like I said, if you've got a George Kittle, a Travis Kelce, maybe because you want to invest in some youth, even though you probably shouldn't, depending on your team. But right, Evan Ingram, if you were looking for a plan B, needing some youth, I think Dalton Schultz and Cole Kmet are great number 2 options to have in your team waiting in the wings, because after this year, they could be in a much more ideal situation. So there is our top 15 Dynasty tight ends, right? Sam Laporta, Trey McBride in the S tier, Brock Bowers, Dalton Kincaid, TJ Hawkinson, Kyle Pitts, and Mark Andrews in the A tier, Travis Kelce, George Kittle in the C tier, Evan Ingram, David Njoku, Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goedert in the C tier, and then wrapping things up with Dalton Schultz and Cole Kmet in the D tier. Like I said, that wraps up our positional tier ranking videos in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Our quarterback, running back, wide receiver ranking videos will be in the description below, so be sure to check those out as well. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel because we will be getting into redraft fantasy football, discussing draft strategies, doing a bunch of mock drafts, and having a host of guests with their wealth of knowledge on our channel as well. So make sure you're subscribed to not miss out on any of those. And go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know who we are too low on, who we are too high on, where you would place these guys in your own tier rankings. Let us know in the comments below. We will see you tomorrow on the newest episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas podcast, where we kick off our redraft ranking series. You don't want to miss it. So again, make sure you are subscribed, and we will see you then. Deuces.